I thought the Sikh guest we had on just now was absolutely superb. And he made such a good point about the Kirpan. It's caused absolutely no problems. It would be a real overreaction to change the law on that, when actually the killer had already been ostracised from the community. He could have used a kitchen knife to murder Henry Nowak. There's nothing to do with the religious sensibility.
And what we know is the knife he used was not the Kirpan.
Indeed.
It was an 8-inch blade.
So he murdered Henry Nowak because he was a murderer. And he could have carried a kitchen knife if he wanted to, wouldn't he? What good would it do to ostracise a community that has been so integral, actually, to British history for the last 200 years?
We had Sarah Bradham on the other day, who's now with Reform, and she said the Kirpan has to go.
Well, Robert Jenrick actually announced it on this programme on Friday when we were interviewing him on Britain's Newsroom. But I do think that is a distraction. That is not what happened here.
Well, we're going to talk now to Amandeep Singh, who is a Sikh educator at the Basics of Sikhi Charity. Good morning to you, Amandeep.
Good morning. Thank you for having the show.
We don't have many Sikhs on the show, so it's a pleasure to have you on. We did speak to a member of your community the other day who expressed his horror and revulsion at the way some people may now view the Sikh community after the senseless killing of Henry Nowak. Can you tell us, Amandeep, a little bit about Sikhism, what you stand for?
Well, first and foremost, just to echo the sentiments of the gentleman that you just referred to, the Sikh community has lost sleep over this incident. I think the first out of the bat to condemn unequivocally the actions of the murderer of Henry Nowak have been those from the Sikh community. There is a feeling of betrayal and outrage. We're a community that are celebrated in this country as having properly integrated into the British value system. My grandfather came to this country in the army, and to see this legacy, this distinguished and honourable legacy of our history tarnished in this way has been something that has had the whole community completely beside itself. Aside from community feelings, as a father, I was actually driven sick to my stomach, quite literally. I was literally driven sick to my stomach, having to think about the Novak family and just the idea of them having to wake up this morning and putting it simply, their son isn't here. It's been an absolute nightmare to try and empathise and put ourselves in the thoughts and prayers that are of the Novak family.
Amandeep, I was just reading this morning about the history of Sikhism in the UK, and I didn't realise quite how far back it went. And actually, apparently, according to Google, the first high-profile Sikh in the UK was a Maharaja, the last ruler of the Sikh Empire, who was exiled to England in 1854. And ever since then, so getting on for 200 years, Sikhs have been building community within the UK, and as you said, are seen to be one of the most well-integrated communities in the UK. Do you think this incident, even though it really had nothing to do with the fact that the murderer was a Sikh, do you think this incident will actually damage that history, will damage people's views of what Sikhs believe and do?
Well, it's very interesting that you allude to our history here. As I mentioned, my grandfather came to this country as part of the Allied forces. And Winston Churchill, who is perhaps the most decorated prime minister that this country has ever had, he spoke in Parliament and forever enshrines the sentiments that laid the foundations of those first Sikhs that came to the country. What does he say about Sikhs? He says that the British public, the British people will will for a long time be indebted to the Sikhs. Twice we have asked them to stand with us, and twice they have answered our call. 80,000 Sikhs died fighting for the freedoms that now we freely enjoy in this country. 200,000 lost their limbs. We were awarded 14 military Victoria Crosses, which is the highest number proportionately of any community that exists in this country. Wow. That's the highest honour, being awarded in the highest amount to a community that I'm just grateful to be a part of, that I'm grateful to have a link to by way of history. I take no credit for that. All we can do is stand on the shoulders of those great giants that have created those freedoms that we enjoy. So in answer to your question, yes, it has been deplorable to have the whole community, which has been here for hundreds of years, dragged through the mud. And I might add, I don't wish to take it was very upsetting to read the Daily Mail refer to this guy as a Sikh killer. Now, I'll make it very clear, this murderer has been ousted from the community prior to him committing this heinous crime. He was kicked out of the Sikh temple. He was arrested, and he was kicked out of the temple and barred from coming to the Sikh temple in Southampton, as I understand it. But what was really upsetting was the way that this has been politicised. If you look at the Daily Mail, they refer to him as a Sikh killer. Now, respectfully, Jimmy Savile, who's probably the most prolific paedophile this country's ever known, was never referred to as a Roman Catholic paedophile. Prince Andrew, who has established connections to Jeffrey Epstein, has never once been referred to as a Church of England affiliate. And I just think that's really irresponsible, childish. I hope that the people of this country can recognise that that is just political rhetoric being funneled through a newspaper, when really the news is supposed to be that subject matter that should be put out there fairly and justly. And that really did upset me, because you recognise that he's been ousted by the community, Miriam, but the Daily Mail, who are supposed to be doing their research, have done the exact opposite.
Amandeep, can I ask you about the Kirpan? Now, that is something that's very integral to part of your faith. It's that small ceremonial blade. Can you explain, Amandeep, why it is important for some of you to always wear the Kirpan? And are you wearing yours now?
Correct. Yes, I am. I've taken an oath to defend all and anybody, and to serve all and anybody that might come upon my path. This evening, as is the case most nights, me and my friends are going to be out in the streets of London serving the homeless with the Sikh Welfare and Awareness Team. We've been awarded awards from the Queen for doing so. And those freedoms and those obligations which we've taken oaths to protect and to stand for include the mandatory keeping of the Kirpan, which is the article of faith, the Sikh ceremonial sword that is worn in this country for centuries without any incident. It is worn underneath my clothing. It's a small symbol and a reflection of my obligation, my oath, if you will, to stand up for all and any injustice. The roots of that come from our ninth Guru, who gave his life under a regime that was sweeping across India at the time, where there was a forceful conversion of everybody under the banner of Islam. The Mughals who had entered India were set upon bringing a forced regime of conversion, and it was in response to that the 10th Guru said no, that if you're going to be a Sikh, then you'll have the right to stand up and defend against injustice. And so it was mandated upon the Sikhs that all baptized Sikhs they should wear this Kirpan. Winston Churchill famously said that if you're going to join the armed forces, we will not accept any Sikhs. We will not have you. We will not have you unless you are adorned with that sacred symbol of faith. So it was actually mandated by the British that if you're going to call yourself a Sikh, you have to be a Sikh in spirit and in form. And it was actually mandated under the armed forces.
Can I ask you, when you say it's a small blade, Amandeep, how big is the blade?
Look, the Kirpan that I'm wearing is a very small ceremonial sword. I'm a practicing lawyer. When I go to court, it's underneath my shirt. It's underneath my suit. If you want to get into specifics for some particular reason, I can go.
Well, it's just some people are saying politically now that even respecting your religious faith, that actually it's an exception that's made for your faith, that you can have around your neck or under your clothing a blade, which is potentially a lethal weapon. So I think people are interested to know how big it is. Even though I hate what you say, it's been part of your faith with no difficulty forever. And I quite accept the monster who killed Henry Nowak was just that, a monster. Nothing to do with his faith.
Well, I'm glad that you said that. Why the Daily Mail have read it. Literally the first two words in the article are Sikh killer. So I'm glad that you've acknowledged that. It's an interesting question that you've raised. That it's an interesting point that you've made, Andrew, and I welcome you for making that. That forever, this has been something that has never been brought into disrepute. That's a big statement. Every community has bad apples, but for the Sikh community, which has a long and established and a distinguished history in this country, to have no incidents in a group of, we're 500,000 strong in the UK, to have no incidents of that having been brought into disrepute, that's your answer there. We look at our history. If you want to look at what the present dangers are, we can look at our history, historical and recent, to see there's been no incidents. I mean, it was quite embarrassing for the Hampshire Police to come on the radio yesterday. I think it was an LBC. You'll have to forgive me. There's been lots of media representation, so you'll forgive me if I've saw it wrong. And he was just destroyed. Somebody asked him, they said, can you give us one incident where the Kirpan has been used in a way that you're now trying to rally up, to whip up hatred and fear? And he said, he just stumbled his words and said no. So let's look at the facts. Let's look at our cold, hard, and distinguished history. This is not an exception. This is an honour and a privilege that has been bestowed upon us from the highest level, and it's been maintained at that level and celebrated at that level for hundreds of years.
All right, Amandeep, thank you so much for coming on and being so frank. And thank you. Amandeep Singh is a Sikh educator at the Basics of Sikh charity.
I thought the Sikh guest we had on just now was absolutely superb. And he made such a good point about the Kirpan. It's caused absolutely no problems.
Yeah.
It would be a real overreaction to change the law on that when actually the killer had already been ostracised from the community.
Yeah.
He could have used a kitchen knife to murder Henry Nowak. There's nothing to do with the religious sensibility.
Yeah, and what we know is the knife he used was not the Kirpan.
Indeed.
It was an 8-inch blade.
So he murdered Henry Nowak because he was a murderer.
Yeah.
And he could have carried a kitchen knife if he wanted to, wouldn't
exactly.
he? What good would it do
Yeah.
to ostracise a community that has been so integral actually to British history for the last
we had Sola
200
Brabham
years.
on the other day, who's now with Reform, and she said the Kirpan has to go.
Well, Robert Jenrick actually announced it on this programme on Friday when we were interviewing him on Britain's Newsroom. But I do think that is a distraction. That is not what happened here.